There's something you just can't describe about striking your first arc. That moment that you realize this is what I'm meant to do. Welcome to Weld, where each week we explore different pathways in the welding industry. I'm your host, Beau Wigington, and this week we're heading back to where it all starts, education. You gotta learn how to weld one way or another, so how do we do it better? How do you level up your career with training and certification? And what does the future of welding education really look like? We dive in right now.
My name is Marc. My last name is Levin. I run a program called Welder Underground here in Brooklyn, New York, where we teach young people ages 18 to 28 to become certified welders. And the way we do this program, the way we run this program is slightly different than most programs. We actually run it as an apprenticeship program where we pay people $15 an hour to learn.
One thing I would like to talk about is just apprenticeships versus like a traditional school. Like if people out there aren't familiar with that, like what's the difference?
Okay, so there's differences in trade schools, among trade schools, right? There's differences in all these. Everybody has a slightly different way of approaching something. The way that we do it here is we like the traditional apprenticeship program that's been going on for hundreds of years. We've tried to modify that for a more contemporary era. And what that means is we pay apprentices to come who have zero skills whatsoever. That's not a prerequisite. The only prerequisite to wanting to learn with us and wanting to go through this apprenticeship program is first is the ability to show up on time, because that's a critical element. And then B, the passion and enthusiasm to want to learn these skills and have a drive and a desire to put them to use in some good purpose moving forward in their lives. So the way we operate this apprenticeship program is we pay each apprentice $15 an hour, as I said. And the reason we pay the apprentices, even though they have no formal training or any kind of passive training even, is because it's the difference between people who otherwise wouldn't have a chance to go through a program like this, would have to take, jobs at let's Starbucks or some other, kind of, I'm not going to call them dead end jobs, but jobs that just, they're to earn a little bit of money so that they can live day to day. And what we're saying is, like, if we can take that pressure off of these young people and give them an idea and an opportunity, not an idea, but an opportunity to learn these skills, it changes their lives. It changes the lives of the people that they know. It changes how they feel about themselves. And for us, it's a great way to spend a day because we're around young people who have loads of energy, who bring loads of enthusiasm and creativity. Every time we've ever taught any young people to come through while we're building a project, the minute we put a torch in their hand, they all love it. The minute they drop it's just like it was unilateral. They all loved it. So the difference became like, if I teach somebody some woodworking, it takes them 3 months before they can do anything. And if you see what these 6 apprentices who are now in this cohort did in the first 2 weeks, everybody's just like, they love it. They're good. They work harder. They find connection to it. It really does feel like a superhero. It's like, feels like a superpower, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why we're just like, welding is it. I knew welding was it. I've known it for years now. And then we thought, okay, like, how can we teach welding in a way that it's not currently being done? How can we create the conditions for people to come in and learn these skills, but do it in the most compelling way possible? So I thought there's only 2 ways to do it. One is to teach them how to build airplanes, which we don't have the room space. Or my second idea was, how do we teach them to learn these skills while building a huge art installation? And so that's where it is now. So the way that we do it is we're teaching young people to learn to weld through building a 18-foot tall sculpture that is our very first project. And it's a project that was designed by an artist in New York named Eric Orr. He's a great hip-hop artist, did the very first hip-hop comic book, and used to paint in the subways with Keith Haring. If you're not familiar with Keith Haring was a very famous artist in the 80s who now sells his stuff for millions and millions and millions of dollars. He's since passed away. But they were painting the subway and creating these characters all throughout the subways. And we took one of these characters and we're now translating it into an 18-foot tall sculpture that we're donating to Paris to commemorate the very first Olympics that has braking as a sport. So it's the very first time, this Olympics that's coming up in 2024 in Paris is the first Olympics that's going to feature braking as a sport. and it may never happen again, So we were like, okay, what a great way to teach welding. We will build this huge sculpture. We'll donate it from the home of hip hop to Paris. And for the entirety, the rest of these kids' lives, and this sculpture, we found a location in Paris. We worked with the Parisian government to find a location that it's going to live. This sculpture is going to live in perpetuity there. And these kids, for the rest of their lives, will not only have the skills and have learned to weld, but they will be able to say for the rest of their lives, I built that and there it is and it lives and it stands and I was part of that.
Thank you for joining me today. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience just in case they're not familiar with you and your work?
Right on, man. Yeah, I'm Nate Bowman, known as the WELD scientist on social media.
You were talking about how I feel like more people need to know that this is a science. And yeah. I agree. I agree with you because your traditional welding program, they're just going to teach you how to pass a test to get a job.
I realized that I needed to do something about welding education. And I was like, man, this should not be just hidden in a book that no one knows about. Everybody should know what the knobs do, how to check their work, and how to develop and read welding procedures. I'm like, man, how is this stuff not being talked about? Welding instructors will teach you what they know and what they've learned in their career. And I think the problem with that is, and it's not necessarily their fault because there's not really a lot of continuing education opportunities for welders in general, but instructors either. You know what I mean? If you're a high school welding instructor, where are you going to go to take a continuing education welding course? And then also in your head, if you're like, hey, I'm just teaching kids how to weld, why do I need to learn any more about welding? I just need to teach how to make this work. And the problem with that is you're preparing students for the career that you had, not for welding in their career. You need to be preparing welders for the future. In our lifetime, there's going to be people welding in space. Yeah. So when you're spending 6 weeks on 60-10, 70-18, I'm wearing a stick welding shirt. I love stick welding. I use it all the time. The last welding job that I got paid to do was 70-18 overhead. And it was with that credential that I got from that welding school. That was the last job that I had to do, just for a buddy of mine, just a little structural steel job. So 60-10, 70-18, super important to learn and know how to use. However, if you want to get a job in the industry and you want to go make a living and go work someplace 40 hours a week, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be pulling the trigger of a MIG gun. Yeah. I mean, that's just the reality of what it is. And even now welding on pipe and stuff, there's tons of ways to MIG weld pipe where you don't have to have starts and stops anymore. You don't have to be changing rods out. You don't have to deal with slag. There's a lot of that technology that's existed for quite a long time, but you look at all these welding schools and they still continue to kind of just teach these same old school techniques, which are a great foundation, but there's a lot of that stuff that's just being missed. This is kind of where my future plans are, is how do I help people without insulting anyone? Because welders are very particular, and I know because I am one. So I know how that is when somebody comes and tells you that your settings are wrong or you've been doing things wrong or whatever. It's very easy to get offended. I've been trying to figure out a way to advocate for people and let them know that I'm here to help. And that's really one of the biggest parts about what I try to do with my brand is I try and open it up to anybody. Still to this day, I don't have any unread DMs. So if you send me a message or there's somebody out there that has a question, whether I'm on a long flight or I'm sitting in a hotel, which happens quite a bit, I burn through all my DMs and get back to people and close the loop and figure out how to solve your problem the best I can. There's things that I don't know for sure. And I will definitely tell you, I've never done this. I've never seen this. I have no idea, but I'll ask somebody that I know that might know. That's one of the benefits of social media for all of us, is that now we can kind of pass information around a lot more easily. Mm-hmm. But the problem with that is, just like the regular media, is information can be bent or twisted or spun in any way that you want it to be. So regardless of, how you feel about a particular process, somebody could be like, this is the greatest thing ever. Or somebody could also make an argument that it's the worst way to possibly do it. Yeah. but I base what I do in science, and I'm like, I don't care what your feelings are. What does the data show? As an inspector, okay, what's inspection criteria? What do we need to meet in order for this to pass? And then how do we get to that point? And I don't care if you stand on your head when you weld it. Like, none of that stuff matters to me, what you do, as long as we get the results that we want and they're repeatable 10 times out of 10.
My name's Jason Becker. I actually hosted the Weld.com channel back in 2019 to mid-2020. I think those dates are relatively accurate.
Hey, you were on there last year.
I was on there last year. You guys came out to Underground Metalworks and did some videos. But currently got a background in welding education. I taught welding for the past 10 years. Now I own and operate my own school, Underground Metalworks in Orlando, Florida, focusing mostly on home hobbyists, makers, DIYers, people looking to skill up. And then I'm also the owner and operator of WeldWorks Training Center, which is the accredited testing facility side of the house where we test and certify welders that are in the industry looking to get certified, or work with different companies to help them develop procedures for the work that they're bidding on, and then get their team certified to be able to do the work.
Well, welding tests, that was the main thing. You are the scariest place for a lot of people to go when they're trying to get a job.
That's what I hear. Everybody comes in, they're all nervous. They're like, It's like, why are you shaking, man? They're like, well, I'm nervous. Why are you nervous? Well, I got to take a welding test. It's like, yeah, man, but you're just welding, right? Don't overcomplicate it. You do this stuff day in and day out. Don't do anything different.
You know, that is a hard part for a lot of people, especially like students coming out of school, like taking that first weld test can be really, really intimidating. What are some of the most common things that will make you fail a weld test right away?
Oh, man, failing to hold at the hold points. When folks are in school or they're on the job, they may not be used to specific hold points. Out in industry, you're going to have to deal with hold points, whether that's preheat, root check, fit up, all those different things. So as part of the accredited testing facility, one of the things that we have on our router sheet is hold points. And if you just kind of blow past a hold point, that's an automatic failure. We're going to check the fit up. That's a hold point, right? I need to see everything fit up as a hold point before you proceed with the test. Once you get it in position, I need to see that plate, that pipe, whatever, in the position according to the test that you're taking. I need to see it welded up or tacked up in a fixture without a root pass in it. After that, once you put the root pass in, I have to inspect the root pass. Like, these are some of the whole points that you had to go through when you come out to test at our facility.
Oh, yeah.
So if somebody skips over that, it's an automatic failure. I've had people, and I explain this to them and I say, hey, once you hold at that point, you're going to initial, and then I'm going to initial that we actually, adhere to that hold point. I get people, and it's probably because they're nervous or they're not used to hold points, but they'll put the root in and then they'll go put a hot pass right over top of it. And I'm like, man, it's been he's been in there for a couple of minutes. He should have the root pass in by now. And I walk in and, they're halfway through their inner passes by now. And it's like, hey, I got to stop you right there. It's a failure. I told you I had to inspect the root pass. That's part of the requirements of the test. So unfortunately, you're going to have to go get some remedial training, and then you can come back and, I'll test you again. But as of right now, it's a fail. And it sucks because, like, I had one kid, he put in I'm assuming it was a slick root. I never got to see it. But his inner pass was it was perfect. I mean, everything was tied in. It was nice and clean. It was flat. So I knew he knew what he was doing. But because he skipped over that hold point, I had to fail him. I've had people, I tell them, once you get done with the test, leave it in position. I'll come over and I'll do a preliminary check to make sure you don't have any low spots or discontinuities that we can take care of while the test is in process. Because once that plate comes down, that's it. The test is over. So before you take it down, come get me and I will authorize you to take that plate down. You'll initial that the test is completed. I'll initial that the test is completed. Then we'll take it down. I've had students, I keep saying students. I test a lot of students. But folks that come in to do the test, and then they'll just walk right up with their completed test and hand it to me. And they'll be like, hey, I'm done. Like, you failed. Why did I fail? You skipped over a hold point. So that's those are some, that'll fail you really quick is skipping over a hold point. Because I need to see that plate in position, because I'll go through and I think when you came out to do the test, I marked all over the fixture so that if you moved it, I could see that, right? I need to make sure that you're not taking that plate down, welding it flat, and then, bringing it back to me,
So these certificate, like when I went to school, I got a certificate in welding technology. And a lot of people, they think a certificate and a certification is the same thing, you know? So like, what's your big difference when it comes to a welding certificate versus a welding certification?
It really depends on the school standards, but I mean, most of the time your certificate for your welding program, like I have one of those from the tech school that I went through. I got one from the ironworkers when I went through. It's kind of like your participation trophy almost, because it basically states, okay, yes, you were here every day. You met the attendance requirements and you met all of the, academic requirements, whether it was hands-on practical or, welding theory and written tests and all that stuff. You met all the basic requirements here. Boom, you got a certificate from the welding school. That doesn't mean you're certified to weld anything. So there's a lot of checks and balances when it comes to an actual certification. There's a lot of logistics and paperwork that goes along with it. And that's what a lot of people don't really get to see that until they actually go to an accredited testing facility or a reputable testing establishment.
Or watch the video. If going to a traditional welding school isn't in the cards for you, but you want to learn at home, check out the courses from the American Welding Program. Whether you're striking your first arc or you're chasing your CWI, they got courses for people at every step of the journey along the way. And because you're listening to Weld right now, use the code WELD20 to save yourself 20% on courses, textbooks, everything they got over there at AmericanWeldingProgram.org. Go check out everything they have that you could start learning today. Now, let's get back to the episode.
My name's Justin Mixon. I'm the Assistant Director of Quality for Crystal Steel and Treasurer for the Delmarva AWS section.
You have had quite the journey into your welding career. So, like, where did it all start? Where did you first start welding?
I worked as a fitter for a miscellaneous shop. I built handrails and burglar bars and that kind of thing for about a year. I worked at a transformer manufacturer for about a year and got a lot of exposure to different processes there. And then ultimately ended up back in a machine shop. It was open to the public, anything that somebody may want to have fabricated or, from pretty sophisticated machinery, building up shafts and things like that to be turned back down by a machinist. Anything that you could break and drag in the door.
So your CWI, CWE, CWS, these are all awesome things to have, but you have to keep up with them, correct? So your CWI specifically, you're coming up on your 9-year renewal. How are you tackling that? Because there's a couple different ways you could go about it. And the way that you specifically told me you're going about it is different than most people probably would.
I see it as a step up going for the Senior Certified Welding Inspector. I knew that was something that I wanted to go towards ever since I had the Real Education Seminar. The instructor that I had was a Senior Certified Welding Inspector. And I know it has a broader range of responsibilities to acquire that certification. Mostly where I see it applied in the field is you may be responsible for monitoring several CWIs on the project, and they'll ask for an SCWI there. But, it shows that you've been a CWI for at least 9 years. You've been able to competently apply the information from the body of knowledge that you would have had to have been able to pass the test. You had to be able to meet the requirements.
It's like being a doctor in the welding world.
At least as far as being a certified welding inspector, that's the last step on the ladder.
How many do you think there are in the U.S.?
They're few and far between.
Yeah.
I only personally know maybe 3 people. And I've met 2 of them on LinkedIn.
That's just the cool part about the welding industry. A lot of people don't know is that, there's so many different certifications you can get both on the welding side and on the inspection side. So it's a way to stay engaged in your career, in my mind, where either if you're going down the welding route, there's a bunch of welding certifications you could get. But as far as the inspection route, there's a bunch of different options for you to go down. It's just interesting to me.
There's a whole world of non-destructive testing out there. And, depending on whether you go into structural, pressure vessels, pipelines of some sort, I don't even really know. 12 or 15 different commonly used different types of non-destructive testing that's out there. And they only really use about 3 of those in structural. Phased array ultrasonics is becoming more widely accepted, and that's pretty amazing technology there. There are people that make, good livings, and that's the only thing that they do is the non-destructive testing aspect of it.
There's just more options to go down in life. If you get into the welding industry and, if it's not what you see yourself doing for the rest of your life, there's a lot of options for you out there.
I'm Adam Streich. I'm a welding instructor in Knoxville, Tennessee at AK Streich. We've been on a bunch of the videos together, done a bunch of the work with Weld.com, hanging out with you, and some of the other content. I'm also AWS section chair, CWI, welder fabricator.
There's a lot of welding knowledge out there, and there's a lot of varying opinions, especially when it comes down to some specific topics that I've picked out. And I thought you would be the guy to talk to about them. As far as pushing versus pulling, getting more penetration. I've been told if you drag, you get more penetration with MIG. And then I've also been told if you push, you get more penetration. What's your viewpoint?
Ooh, if you actually cut and look at just a bead on a plate, a dragged weld with a short circuit MIG will give you more of like a needle-like penetration, and a push will give you more of like a flattened oval penetration for the short circuit side. Now, if you're doing spray, I've had guys say, oh, you got to drag that. And I'm like, you can, but you really should be pushing that. The argument that I have anytime somebody makes a hard argument is if you go into and out of a corner, at some point I have to transition between dragging and pushing and still maintain a quality weld and everything I'm looking for inside of the weld. So at some point, I'm even stick welding, I might push. Now, flux core, you are more prone to having higher quality welds, dragging that, than you are pushing it. Again, application specific. In general, I'm going to say if you got a hard wire, push it. If you got slag, you drag. I think people draw a line in the sand and try and stand on one side of it. And it's like, but what if you can't reach it? What if you can't get to it? What if it's inside out? What if you're hanging upside down? Sometimes you got to work with what you got. I'll use stick welding as a good example of slag and drag. I've actually found pretty okay-ish luck pushing aluminum stick rods. If you're welding aluminum, you're using a push technique anyways. So with aluminum stick rods, I heard somebody say, well, try pushing it. And it's like, it still looks like an aluminum stick weld, but it did work a little bit better. It's a lot like polarity, right? People will say, oh, you got to, you can only run it DC electrode, stick DC electrode positive. And you're like, well, a whole pile of AC rods. And sometimes we want to run DC. And if I'm, again, trying to not get penetration into something, I've had to, fix rusty patio furniture and stuff. And you're like, penetration's not the problem. Striking an arc and having metal disappear is the problem. Turning it to electrode negative and dropping down in rod size and even pulsing on top of it to get things to actually start showing up. So you got metal to adhere to.
That's a good transition because there's a lot of misconceptions about DCEP versus DCEN. When I was going through school, I was told DCEP, the positive is hotter. DCEN, the negative is hotter. Correct?
The easiest way that I've found to explain this, especially in a classroom, is like, are we melting the plate or are we melting the thing in our hand, the electrode, if you will? So that's why I like TIG, I'm melting the plate. I'm not trying to melt the electrode, which is steel stainless, is going to be ran DCEN because I want to melt the plate, not the electrode. If I'm melting the electrode, hard wire, flux core, stick, I want to be DCEP generally, other than self-shielded. Even that's a whole different conversation, but
I went down and saw Jason and we did some experimenting with self-shielded and dual shield. I was like, all right, so if we have dual shield, what happens if we don't have gas? That one was pretty easy and obvious to see what happens. And then I was like, okay, well, with self-shielded, what happens if we add gas, And he was like, I don't think it's going to work. And it came out looking great.
It looks fantastic, but it's a terrible weld.
Why? Like, what makes that a bad weld?
I could actually send you an article on that.
It'll be in the show notes.
I'll send you an article you can link in the show notes that I asked a guy much smarter than me about this. Explain this to me like I'm a fifth grader answer. It stemmed from a student asking, well, why? And I was like, well, the things in the flux. And they're like, what things? Why? I went almost a year of asking everybody I could find. buying textbooks on the subject to try and find the right answer. And I've got some pretty nerdy stuff I've come up with. There's things in the flux that are actually, they're robbing the nitrogen and oxygen from the atmosphere to create that self-shielded bubble. And if you shield it, you're not getting the nitrogen and the oxygen contents it's looking for, and it'll actually become typically a really brittle weld. If you were to do like a Sharpie impact, or some destructive testing on it, you'd find out that, whoops, that didn't work.
It looked great, but it was not great. Have you ever done underwater welding?
I have not. I do have my scuba certs, and everybody's like, oh, is that so you can do underwater? And I'm like, someday I'd love the opportunity to give it a shot, but I think I've exceeded the age capacity of underwater welding career in my future.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I think I just missed it. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience, just in case they've never heard of anything we do here at weld.com?
What's up, everyone? My name's Austin Hargett. I'm the brand ambassador for weld.com. You see our faces all the time. So,
there's a bunch of different directions people can go. And after school, like teaching, you jumped into weld.com, and we've been going down this wild journey together for a couple of years now. And
yes,
what led you to make that decision? And why are you excited to do this more than just go back out in the field?
Well, let's make it very clear. I was teaching first, and then someone called me, hit me in my DMs and said, do you want to make YouTube videos for a living? And I was like, yeah. Now, from the outside looking in, that just seemed like the better job, right? If you can match what I'm making teaching right now, I have no problem taking that opportunity to go make videos in my shop. So that's kind of what ended up happening. And again, more for a selfish reason, I get to do the same thing at home. But the benefit to that I've seen since I've started to do it is I get not only a bigger platform to teach off of, but I get to teach what I want to teach. The welding industry is vast. There's so much you can do, so many avenues, so many directions, so many things to see and do and touch and feel and try. And schools only are doing the one thing. They're still only doing the pipe and plate in 1, 2, 3, and 4 positions and going through the same 4 processes, the same plates and pipes since, 40 years. They've been doing it the same way. So I think it's time for a change. I think there should be, in schools, it should be like, all right, what do you want to do, student? This is our program. We have a structural welding program where you could go be an iron worker. We'll train you to iron work. You want to be a pipe fitter or fabricator? We'll go teach you over here. You want to do fabrication with automotive parts? Let's come over here. There's so many avenues, right? But they're only teaching so little. And yeah, I think it'd be really nice to have more of a catered program for anyone that wanted to come through. Still have all the classics, right? But like the fab school in California, awesome program, right? Mix that with one of the programs that we got here, along with another program for Ocean Corp and space. And there needs to at least be like a little elective class at the end of the whole thing where you can be like, hey, there's a separate course for another 5 weeks so that we can train you to be this specific thing, because welding is so niche already, and then it breaks off into so many more niches. It's hard to tell someone where to go to work after welding school when you've only taught them one niche.
Yeah, that was my big problem, is I was told 3. I've talked about it on this podcast multiple times, but just like structural, pipe welding, or production, those are the big pathways that people are sent down. But I know that there's a lot cooler things. Like I would love to go do clad welding, that would be something that would be very cool. What is a dream welding experience that you still have not accomplished yet or got to experience, I guess?
I always had a want to weld something in the lowest point that I could possibly weld in, like below sea level, underwater. I've done the underwater welding, so you can kind of check it off, but it's not like low. And I also wanted to weld on something that like the highest that I could ever be, whether it was on one of the highest towers ever or in space, just to say I was able to do it. So I want to be able to weld something at the lowest point and the highest point and everything in between. That was like the big dream.
Hey, there's still time.
I don't know how I'm going to accomplish either one of them really, because the ocean's terrifying and so is space. So
We just did Ocean Corp. We're trained. We can use our bailout. You'll be fine.
Dude, as long as we could do it in the Caribbean and like 20 feet of water, crystal clear. I'm not into like going and get the Bay of Galveston to go do anything.
Go fishing.
Yeah, I'll stay on the boat.
Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Weld, and a huge thank you to everybody that's come on the show. I know I personally have learned a lot through all of these conversations, and know people out there listening, they have too. So we couldn't have done it without you. So thanks again. And speaking of learning, I also want to give a huge shout out to the instructors out there, because you're the people out there doing the hard work. It's important, and you're shaping the next generation of welding. So really take pride in that. And if there's anything we can do at Weld to help you out, please reach out and let me know. I also want to give a huge shout out to the American Welding Program for not only making the show possible, but helping us all save 20% with that code WELD20 on courses, materials, anything you're looking to pick up. Go use that code and you'll save some money. All in all, though, I want to thank you, the listeners, the people tuning in every week, because without you, I'd be just learning all this by myself, and that seems kind of lame. So thanks for doing it with me, and until next time, see you out there.